Hello, this is my Module 2 presentation on infiltration. The first thing that I did was I looked up the next generation science standards to see what I could relate this project to. And I thought the website was very impressive. There was a lot of different ways to search for a standard. So I ended up with this standard, which was a high school standard that relates to Earth systems because we were really looking at the water in terms of how the Earth can either the water runs off or it infiltrates inside of the soil. So the standard says that students will be able to analyze geoscience data to make the claim that one change to Earth's surface can create feedbacks that cause changes to other Earth systems. So I was really focusing on the fact that when we change the Earth's landscape, which is what we do, this is actually changing Earth's system of water infiltration. Specifically, it states here that examples could also be taken from other system interactions, such as how the loss of ground vegetation causes an increase in water runoff and soil erosion. Below this standard, it relates then to science and engineering practices, core ideas, and then cross-cutting concepts, which I thought was really relatable and really focuses on some of the readings that we've done with our STEM education class so far. So for the engineering process, I really had to ask myself, what type of landscapes hold water and which ones do they run off of? So in terms of runoff, this is really when water that runs off the surface or runs off when infiltration of soil hits capacity. So I then used the watershed app to figure out exactly what type of landscapes I wanted to create. So I looked at this barren one and I thought maybe I would create something related to sand, especially because the beach and the summer is coming up. So what happens maybe when the water hits a sand dune. And then I don't have any crops, but I did use some flowers because they have a lot of roots to really soak in the water. So then the engineering process began and I had to imagine the type of landscapes I was going to build. And I ended up creating the flowers were in this one. There were a lot of roots. I put some stones at the bottom. This is the sand dune, and I dug up the grass from my backyard with the roots. And then I also wanted to see what would happen when there was soil at the bottom and I put some stones in the top, such as like a stream. So I first started to test and the water was not coming out of the pitcher that I had used first, so I had to change this so that it was going into the water bottles that I had used. And here is the video of me pouring the water into the sand dune. So you'll notice at first it starts to come off and then all of a sudden there is kind of a pocket here and the sand's actually holding the water, but it's creating a puddle, which actually is what happens at the beach when the waves come up sometimes. In this one, the water's coming on top of the stone and it looks dirty, but it's not soil. It's actually the color of the stone, which I would think that this probably would not happen if the water rains on stones all the time. It probably doesn't have all of that color. Oops. So this was the beginning process and this was the end process. This one with the flower definitely had the most soil runoff, or sorry, had the least soil runoff, and because the roots were really soaking in the water. Step was to relate it to our STEM practices. So in terms of science, we were asked a question and we had to create a model and use models like the watershed activity and the simulation in order to figure out how we were going to create our landscape. For engineering, the problem really is what happens if we need to minimize runoff with the Earth systems. And I had to create a prototype and design landscapes on my own. So designing and thinking of that process was an engineer. In terms of technology, we really need to become aware of technological systems that our society depends on, which is infiltration, and that's just a natural system. So systems that are created when there is a lot of runoff, what type of society things actually cause this. And in terms of math, oh, and also we did use the watershed simulation, which is a technology investigation that students can use in the classroom in order to help them explore this. For math, I really had to persevere in solving the problem, and so it made me think more in terms of problem-solving strategies in order to figure out this experiment. So we had to determine the problem and work through different materials that create different landscapes. You could also use some math intending to precision and measuring in terms of the actual runoff that comes and how much soil was in it. But I did not do that for this presentation, but I'm sure that students could do that in order to apply some more math abilities in the class. So in summary, the plant absorbed the most water with a little bit of runoff. The sand had runoff, but then was also set in ruts, and it was actually holding the water. And then the stone had a little bit of dirt runoff, but dust from the stones were getting picked up. And lastly, here are my references for Module 2. Thank you.